Historical origin of the concept. There is an important relationship between the concept of social representations and Durkheim's concept of collective representations, which refers to common ways of conceiving, thinking about and evaluating social reality. According to Moscovici, this concept by Durkheim is, however, too static and is therefore insufficient to understand the contemporary society. It does not capture the dynamics, variability and plurality of social cognitions of today's world, he claims. To include all this, he therefore suggests the new concept social representation. As noted by Markova, social representations may even be considered as thoughts in movement developing through communication. What are social representations? Social representations concern different types of collective cognitions, common sense or thought systems of societies or groups of people. They are always related to social, cultural, and or symbolic objects. They are representations of something. There is no clear-cut definition used by the advocates, and Moscovici himself gives a number of definitions. Social representations concern the contents of everyday thinking and the stock of ideas that give coherence to our religious beliefs, political ideas and the connections we create as spontaneously as we breathe. They make it possible for us to classify persons and objects, to compare and explain behaviors and to objectify them as part of our social setting. While representations are often to be located in the minds of men and women, they can just as often be found in the world and as such examined separately. From the dynamic point of view, social representations appear as a network of ideas, metaphors and images more or less loosely tied together according to Moscovici. Social representations are not to be seen as logical and coherent thought patterns. They may instead be full of thought fragments and contradictory ideas. With the concept cognitive polyphasia, social representations theory refers to the fact that everyday thinking about something may be characterized by different, sometimes opposite forms of thinking. Communicative mechanisms. Social representations theory specifies how collective cognitions are produced and transformed through communication with a focus on the socio-cognitive processes or mechanisms involved. Whereas on one hand, all human interaction presupposes collective cognitions, meaning social representations. On the other hand, individuals and groups produce social representations through social interaction and communication. According to Moscovici, there are two functions of representations. They conventionalize objects, persons and events we are meeting by giving them a specific form, localize them to a given category and gradually establish them as distinct and shared cognitions. They are also prescriptive in the sense that they, through social structures and traditions, are forced upon us. Although we incorporate them into our individual minds, as individuals we rethink collective cognitions. It is important, however, to note that individuals and groups can rework and transform collective cognitions. This idea that there is a basic link between the collective and the individual, between the present and the past, and between the known and the unknown underlies the theory of social representations. As Moscovici puts it about the relationship between the present and the past, in many respects the past is more real than the present. The peculiar power and clarity of representations, that is of social representations, derives from the success with which they control the reality of today through that of yesterday. All representations aim to make something unfamiliar or unfamiliarity itself familiar. The theory specifies two basic socio-cognitive communicative mechanisms that generate social representations: anchoring and objectifying. The first mechanism, anchoring, makes the unknown known by bringing it into a well-known sphere of earlier social representations so that we may make comparisons and interpret it. The second mechanism, objectifying, makes the unknown known by transforming it into something concrete we may perceive and touch and thus control. Anchoring. By communication, social representations are anchored again and again in other social representations. This is a kind of cultural assimilation by which new social representations are incorporated into the well-known ones simultaneously. The latter ones are transformed by the new ones. Gradually then, the unfamiliar ideas become well-known ideas and part of the collective frames of reference of a society. In short, anchoring means that new ideas are related to a well-known phenomenon or context. Different types of anchoring mechanisms are naming, emotional anchoring, thematic anchoring, metaphoric anchoring, and anchoring via basic antinomies. Naming. A most common way of giving the foreign or unknown phenomenon a more well-known face is to name it. By naming something, we extricate it from a disturbing anonymity to endow it with a genealogy and to include it in a complex of specific words, to locate it in fact in the identity matrix of our culture. In this way, the phenomenon is liberated from secrecy and mystery. A new political group may be named as revolutionaries, a new disease is called an epidemic, and so on. Emotional anchoring is an attachment mechanism that is not discussed in the theory of social representations, although Moscovici now and then addresses emotions. For example, in his writings about social representations of money, he brings in emotions of passions and desire. Also in Jodelit's work on madness, emotional aspects are discussed, and Joff argues for that social representations theory keeps a space for symbols infused with an emotional valence. It is emotion that motivates the formation of particular social representations. Explicitly, however, very little has been written about the role of emotions. This fact, Joff noted that the role of emotion has received surprisingly little attention. There is a need to give more space to emotions in social representations theory. Emotional anchoring, therefore, refers to a communicative process by which a new phenomenon is fastened to well-known emotions. By this, the unknown gets recognizable. As shown by the psychological research, emotions may help us to interpret and judge social situations and objects. The mass media willingly exploit this, often maybe in many ways. Social phenomena, events or courses of events are anchored in feelings of fear or an approaching threat or in feelings of anger or compassion. According to Furedi, the increasing stream of scare stories in the media are even transforming Western culture into a culture of fear in which fear feeds on itself and creates the disposition to speculate about other hazards lurking around the corner. Climate change has found to be anchored by the media in a mixture of well-known emotions of fear, hope, guilt, compassion and nostalgia. By this, the scientific phenomenon of climate change turned into a social representation we can compare with other current social phenomena attached to similar emotions like fear of terrorist attacks or environmental risks. Emotional anchoring may be embedded in the language used and or in the photographic pictures or illustrations. Guilt is a socially constructed emotion and concerns violations of social codes and norms. Emotionally anchoring may be related to other forms of anchoring or to processes of objectifications. For example, naming climate change as climate threat or talking about biotechnology in terms of pollution metaphors anchor these phenomena in emotions of fear and anxiety. Thematic anchoring. Anchoring may also take place at more basic thematic levels by the use of underlying categories of meaning, antinomies such as life, death, culture, nature, etc. by the use of metaphors. Moscovici uses the concept of theme to understand the structural in-depth levels of social representations. He argues that underlying collective, general patterns of thinking or primary ideas in interplay with specific contexts generates and structures new social representations. These so-called themes or themata in plural are in themselves socially and culturally constructed and maintained by social processes. According to Moscovici, they have been created by society and remain preserved by society. Since themes never reveal themselves clearly, the analysis of talk, interviews or media products often must move beyond the specific language and visuals used. Themes may be conceived of in ways that come closer to the concept of ideology regarded as common sense thinking or taken for granted ideas in a society or among groups. For example, democracy, human rights or equality. Themes may also be assigned to more universal ideas inscribed into language. Anchoring in antinomies. Dialogicality means, according to Markova, that sense making is founded on a capacity to make distinctions, to think in oppositions, polarities or antinomies. Similar to this, Billig claims that human thinking is based on capacity to negate, accept versus turn away, justify versus criticize, etc. This creates tensions and dynamics in society which may lead to change and development. In all societies, antinomies such as life, death, human being, nature, we, them, fear, hope, freedom, oppression and so on exist. In specific socio-historical contexts, antinomies related to a social phenomenon may become a source of tension, conflict or problem and the phenomenon part of public debate. It is in such situations that new social representations are developed according to Markova. Analyzing oppositional distinctions or antinomies, thus turns focus to intrinsic tensions which may be especially marked in periods when new social representations develop. Taking social representations of climate change as a case, antinomies such as certainty, uncertainty, threat, hope, guilty, not guilty, nature, culture, global, local may organize the discourse. The relationship between themes and antinomies is somewhat unclear in the theory. Moscovici considers themes as basic ideas, pre-existing thought or primary ideas, while according to Markova, antinomies are more basic, also underlying themes. It is worth noting that anchoring in antinomies may appear without thematic anchoring, since not all antinomies of thinking become themata. Anchoring by metaphors. Metaphors make things and phenomena comprehensible by imagining them as something else. For example, life is a journey or time is money. The media reports on human shields in wars and conflicts, war and sport metaphors are common in news reporting on many topics, etc. Some metaphors are universal while many others reflect cultural variations, and there may also exist even more specifically situated metaphors. According to Lakoff and Johnson, everyday language is permeated with metaphors. They even claim that all thinking and communicating basically is metaphoric. There is great variety of metaphors and many attempts to classifications have been made. According to Ritchie, some metaphors are more everyday like, for example, busy as a bee, or other poetical as life is a dream. Some complex with various meanings like life is a struggle. Still others more one-dimensional like the party got out of hand. Root metaphors are those long-lived metaphors permeating cultures. For example, conduit, contain and war metaphors. St. Clair notes that growth metaphors, play metaphors, drama metaphors, machine metaphors, time and room metaphors for a long time have influenced European thinking. Objectification. Objectification makes the unknown known by transforming it into something concrete we may perceive and experience with our senses. It is a kind of materialization of abstract ideas which sometimes occur, not least in the media, by representing the ideas as concrete phenomena existing in the physical world. What is perceived replaces what is conceived, according to Moscovici. Objectifying, according to Moscovici, is a much more active process than anchoring, which occurs almost automatically each time we are confronted with new phenomena. Objectifying, that is turning an unfamiliar idea into concrete reality, requires more effort. Moscovici's own research on the spread of psychoanalytic thinking in French society is essentially a study of how the abstract and relational concepts of psychoanalysis, the unconscious, ego, libido, complexes, neurosis, etc., are objectified into concrete elements in public thinking. A new complex and abstract phenomenon is thereby materialized into familiar frames of references and transformed into everyday common sense. That people conflate weather and climate change has been shown in different studies. Emotional objectification. We may talk about emotional objectification when there is a strong emotional component involved. For example, when concrete and frightening images such as people escaping severe floods, dead cattle or parched soil. To objectify is to discover the iconic quality of an imprecise idea or being, to reproduce a concept in an image, writes Moscovici. He states that some visuals in the media may, through a process of emotional objectification, become icons of more abstract issues. Personification. In objectification through personification, an idea or phenomenon is linked to specific persons, such as when Freud personifies psychoanalysis or Gandhi, political struggle through non-violence. To attach something to well-known public persons is a common discursive mechanism in the media in order to draw attention and popularize courses of events. Basic assumptions of social representation. The general theoretical framework on social representations involves three main assumptions presented by Doisi, Clemency and Lorenzi Cioldi. Social representations can be considered as organizing principles of symbolic relationships between individuals and groups. The first assumption is that various members of a population under study share common views about a given social issue. Social representations are generated in systems of communication that necessitate common frames of reference for individuals and groups participating in the relationships. An important phase in each study of social representations, therefore, is the search for a common cognitive organization of the issues at stake in a given system of social relations. In Moscovici's terms, this aspect of the study of social representations deals with objectification. However, social representations theory does not imply that individuals sharing common references necessarily hold the same positions. The second assumption is that differences in individual positioning are organized. Individuals may differ according to the strength of their adherence to various aspects of social representations. The third assumption is that such systematic variations are anchored in collective symbolic realities, in social psychological experiences shared to different extents by individuals and in their beliefs about social reality. To summarize, there is an important link between the concept of social representations and Durkheim's concept of collective representations. According to Moscovici, this concept by Durkheim is, however, too static in relation to how we should understand contemporary society. Social representations are about different types of collective cognitions, common sense or thought systems of societies or groups of people. They are always related to social, cultural or symbolic objects. They are representations of something. Social representations theory specifies how collective cognitions are produced and transformed through communication with a focus on the socio-cognitive processes or mechanisms involved. By communication, social representations are anchored again and again in other social representations. This is a kind of cultural assimilation by which new social representations are incorporated into the well-known ones simultaneously as the latter ones are transformed by the new ones. Gradually then, the unfamiliar ideas become well-known ideas and part of the collective frames of references of a society. The different types of anchoring mechanisms are naming, emotional anchoring, thematic anchoring, metaphoric anchoring and anchoring via basic antinomies. Objectification makes the unknown known by transforming it into something concrete we may perceive and experience with our senses. It is a kind of materialization of abstract ideas which sometimes occur not least in the media by representing the ideas as concrete phenomena existing in the physical world. Types of objectifications are emotional objectification and personification. Assumptions of social representation. The first assumption is that various members of a population under study share common views about a given social issue. A second assumption is that differences in individual positioning are organized. Individuals may differ according to the strength of their adherence to various aspects of social representations. A third assumption is that such systematic variations are anchored in collective symbolic realities in social psychological experiences shared to different extents by individuals and in their beliefs about social reality.